Thunder split the prairie open. A sky once quiet roared like an old god remembering its anger. The rain didn't fall, it attacked, slashing at the earth in crooked silver lines. And through that storm, a young woman struggled against the rope that bit her wrists raw. The fence behind her shuddered with each gust, old wood crying in pain as if sharing her punishment. She had stopped calling for help hours ago. Hope had a sound, once, soft, alive. Now it was only the creak of wet rope and the whisper of breath that refused to die. Somewhere beyond the rolling dark, hooves struck the ground in rhythm with the thunder. A lone rider emerged, his silhouette flickering in the lightning. He was a Comanche, his hair braided close to his back, his chest bare beneath the rain. A man carved from endurance, carrying both silence and sorrow like twin weapons. He had been riding for days with no purpose left but motion itself, until the storm showed him this shape tied to the earth, struggling but unbroken. He slowed. The horse snorted, uneasy. The man dismounted and approached with the cautious reverence of someone nearing a wounded spirit. The girl lifted her head, eyes dull but alive enough to track the shadow moving closer. She looked neither frightened nor relieved, only emptied. Her lips were cracked, her dress torn by wind and dirt. The world had already taken what it wanted from her. There was nothing left to surrender. He studied the knots, tight, deliberate, cruel. Someone had left her to be found by nothing. The rope gave way under his knife, strands snapping with the sound of bones breaking. When her hands came free, she didn't fall immediately. She stood there a moment, trembling, as if the air itself had to learn how to hold her again. Then her knees folded. He caught her before the ground could. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. He offered no question, only his flask. She drank greedily, half choking, half praying. The water ran down her chin and mixed with the rain. Her voice came out in a whisper that barely had shape. Why? He didn't answer. There were too many questions that lived under that single word. Instead, he pulled his blanket from the saddle and wrapped it around her shoulders. The gesture was small, but it changed something. The storm still raged, but its fury no longer owned her. He helped her onto his horse. The motion startled her. Perhaps she had forgotten what freedom felt like beneath her feet. As they rode, her body swayed against his, the rhythm of the horse thudding through her bones like a second heartbeat. She could feel his steadiness, his calm, the quiet power of someone who had learned to live with ghosts rather than run from them. The storm began to thin. Lightning faded into distant murmurs, and the night revealed a sky bruised with moonlight. The prairie stretched ahead, endless and waiting. For the first time in days, she felt the ache of being alive. When they reached his camp by the river, he dismounted and lifted her down as gently as if she were made of smoke. The fire he kindled flickered uncertainly, small against the dark. He set food near her, dried meat, corn, a tin of beans, but she only stared. Hunger didn't yet trust her body. He sat across the fire, far enough not to threaten, close enough to guard. Minutes passed before she spoke again. Her voice was hoarse, not from fear but from disbelief that someone was listening. "I don't have a name," she said. The words fell heavy between them. He looked at her, and the faint light caught the scar that ran from his cheekbone to his jaw, a reminder of another night when mercy came too late. He nodded slowly. "Then we'll find one when you're ready." His tone wasn't pity, it was a promise spoken like prayer. She turned toward the fire, watching sparks leap upward and vanish into the night. The warmth stung her skin where the ropes had burned it, but she didn't pull away. The pain felt honest, something she could claim as her own. He remained silent, eyes reflecting the flames. She wondered if he, too, had been tied once, by rope or regret, she couldn't tell. The storm's echo lingered in both of them, a reminder that survival was not the same as peace. As the wind softened, she lay down near the fire, wrapped in his blanket, listening to the river hum its endless song. Sleep came slowly, dragging her through half-dreams of thunder and hands reaching. He didn't sleep. He watched her instead, the firelight drawing gentle shapes across her face. In the flicker, he saw something unexpected, strength disguised as fragility. The sky cleared. The first pale stars began to bloom. He whispered to the night, not expecting an answer. Maybe the wind brought you here for a reason. She stirred but did not wake. A tear slid from her closed eye, catching the fire's glow. He looked away, jaw tightening, as if the sight of it hurt more than any wound he'd ever carried. The fire cracked loudly, a spark shooting into the darkness. It landed near the edge of the blanket and hissed out. He leaned forward to brush away the ash, and froze. On her wrist, beneath the dirt, was a faint mark burned into the skin. A brand. He traced it with his eyes, not daring to touch. Whatever story had left that mark was coming for her. And now, for him too. Dawn tore the horizon open with a scream of wind. The river swelled from the night storm, brown and restless, dragging broken branches downstream like memories that refused to sink. The Comanche woke before the sun, haunted by the image of that mark on her wrist. It wasn't just a scar, it was a brand, carved by men who believed ownership could live in flesh. He knew their kind. He had fought them once, bled beside men who wore that same cruelty on their faces. Now it had found its way into his firelight. The girl stirred, shivering despite the blanket. Her eyes blinked open, wary, searching for the world she'd fallen asleep trying to forget. She caught him watching her. The silence that passed between them wasn't empty. It was a language neither had yet learned to speak. She tucked her branded wrist beneath the blanket. He didn't ask, though the question burned behind his ribs. He rose and stoked the fire. Smoke curled upward, gray and slow, carrying the scent of cedar. She watched his hands, strong, deliberate, never hurried. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost lost to the wind. "You can stay till you heal." She nodded, though she didn't understand what healing meant anymore. The world beyond this camp had called her many things: servant, property, burden, but never whole. The word stay sounded dangerous. Hope always was. Days folded together, stitched by firelight and silence. She learned the rhythm of his life, the way he fed his horse first, how he offered a portion of every meal to the ground before eating. He fixed the broken fence that circled the camp, humming under his breath while she sat by the river, washing dirt from her skin until it no longer smelled of fear. Each small act built something invisible between them, something fragile but alive. At night, he told stories, though never about himself. Legends of the wind taking shape as a coyote, of the stars being the eyes of the lost. His words soothed her in ways she didn't understand. He spoke without ownership, as though each story belonged to the air, not him. In return, she began to hum low, trembling tunes from her childhood, pieces of songs she thought she'd forgotten. One evening, while the fire painted their faces gold, he reached for her hand, not to touch the scar, but to see if she would pull away. She didn't. Her hand stayed in his, small, steady. For a heartbeat, the mark between them didn't matter. But peace is a thing that never lasts long on stolen land. The riders came with the dusk, 5 of them, their laughter carrying across the plain like broken glass. White trappers, dressed in greed and dust. The Comanche knew that sound before he saw them, the mockery of men who'd never been told no. He stood before she could rise. His knife flashed in his hand, but his stillness was sharper than the blade. They stopped at the edge of the firelight. The lead man's grin was all teeth. "Didn't think anyone would keep what we left behind," he said. "She's ours." The girl's body froze, the word cutting through her like winter. She stood slowly, the fire behind her throwing long shadows across her face. She didn't look at them. She looked at him, the man who had untied her, fed her, never asked for anything in return. The trappers laughed again, expecting fear. What they saw instead was defiance. She stepped forward until her bare feet touched the edge of the light. "You left me for dead," she said, her voice raw but steady. "He gave me back my name." They didn't understand the meaning, but the tone silenced them. The Comanche took one slow step closer. The knife caught the firelight like a promise. The air between them trembled with the weight of unspoken choices. The leader spat into the dirt. You'll regret this, savage. She turned to the Comanche, eyes fierce and wet. Don't, she whispered. Her voice was not pleading, it was commanding. Let the wind take them, not your hands. He hesitated, every muscle begging to end what they'd started. But her words rooted him. He lowered the knife. The trappers cursed, mounted their horses, and vanished into the horizon, smaller with every heartbeat. Silence returned. Heavy, living silence. The girl's shoulders shook, not from fear but from release. She knelt by the fire, the mark on her wrist glowing faintly in the light. He sat beside her, his breath unsteady. Why did you stop me? He asked. She looked at him, tears trembling but unfallen. Because mercy is what saved me. Maybe it can save you too. The fire cracked between them. Embers spiraled upward, tiny, dying stars. For the first time, he looked at her not as someone he'd rescued, but as someone who had rescued him back. The wind shifted. Somewhere beyond the dark, a horse cried, a single note, sharp and distant. Both of them turned their heads toward the sound. It wasn't the trappers. It was something heavier. A deeper rumble rolling closer, steady as a heartbeat. He rose, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. They're not done, he said softly. The girl reached for his arm, her fingers trembling but strong. Then neither are we.